In this video, I'll show you how to set up the subwoofer control on your new Pioneer in-dash receiver. Even though your particular in-dash receiver may be a 1-DIN model or a 2-DIN model and may or may not have a built-in CD player, the button operation in this demonstration is identical for the following Pioneer Audio in-dash receiver models: MVH-S320BT and 322BT, MVH-S420BT, DEH-S 4200BT and 4220BT, FHS 520BT. Here you can see this in-dash receiver has two sets of RCA outputs. Now these RCA outputs can be set up as front and rear outputs for like running 6.5-inch speakers in the front and the rear of the vehicle, or if you want, you can set up the RCA outputs to be front outputs, and the second one, the rear, can turn into a subwoofer output. So we'll take a look at those types of settings in this video. Okay, so I have my in-dash receiver on the AM/FM radio right now. The first thing I want to do is switch the receiver off, right? So the car is on, the vehicle is on, but I want to switch the receiver off. So press and hold the source button for a couple of seconds. That switches the receiver off. If you hit the display button here, you might have the clock on the screen, but the music is switched off, but the in-dash receiver still has power. So from here, press in on the volume control, and that'll bring up two different menus. One is the initial menu, and you also have the system menu. What we want is the initial menu. So we'll press enter there to enter into the initial menu, and we get what we're after here. It's the speaker and pre-out mode. That's exactly what we want here. Let's press enter. Right now this says rear/subwoofer. This means that the rear speaker outputs are set up as full range outputs, and the rear RCA output is set up as subwoofer output. So this is rear speakers, full range, rear RCA, subwoofer output. Now if we roll over with this setting, this changes the rear speaker outputs to subwoofer output, and it keeps the rear RCA as subwoofer output. So these in-dash receivers are very capable of running a small subwoofer off the rear speaker outputs if you want to do that. And of course we have the rear RCA set up as subwoofer output. Now, if we roll over to the next setting, this says that the rear speaker outputs are set to full range output, like running 6.5s or 6x9s, and the rear RCA is also set up to full range output. So this would mean that the front and rear RCAs are full range. Now in this video, in this demonstration, what I want to do is I want to run 6.5-inch speakers off the front speaker outputs, and that's in the front of my vehicle, and I want to run 6x9s from the rear speaker outputs in the back of my vehicle, and I'm going to run an external amplifier that powers a sub in my vehicle. So what I want is this setting here. So this says the front and the rear speaker outputs are set up to full range, and my rear RCA output is set up for a subwoofer output. So I'm just going to press enter there. That locks that setting into place, and now we'll press the source button to go out to the radio. So now from any source, I'm on the AM/FM radio source right now, and it could be any one. I'm going to press in on the volume control, and let's roll along here until we find the audio menu. There's audio, and we'll press enter. And let's roll along here until we find the subwoofer settings. There we go. Right now you can see the subwoofer is switched off. So if you are turning through these settings, like the speaker level settings and the crossover settings, and you can't find any subwoofer settings, that means you have the subwoofer switched off. Go in here and switch the subwoofer on. So let's roll over to the next setting, and you get the subwoofer in its normal phase, and if you press in on the volume control, you can have the subwoofer output in its reverse phase. Now I really strongly recommend that you try both of these, normal and reverse phase, because you might find one of them sounds a lot better in your vehicle than the other. They're both perfectly good to use. Try them both. Once you've chosen normal or reverse phase, let's roll over to the next setting, which is our speaker level setting, and there's an important setting in here for us. So let's get in here. Here you can see the front left, the front right, those are full range. There's the rear left and rear right. They are both full range in this setup. And there's my subwoofer output. So I'm going to select that, and here I can boost or cut the subwoofer output. Now, when you're using the speaker level controls here, I strongly recommend to you to set all of these settings for both the front, the rear, and the subwoofer to 0 or lower. That's the way you balance out your system. Use 0 or lower. Don't use this as a volume control. You can change the volume level of each speaker independently compared to the other speakers, but you're going to use the master volume to raise the volume inside your vehicle. So once you've chosen a setting for your subwoofer output here, let's go back. And let's roll over to the next setting, which is our crossover settings. And again, very important settings in here for the subwoofer. We'll press enter. So these are the crossover settings for the front output and the rear output, but we want the crossover settings for the subwoofer output. So let's press enter here. So the first thing we see is the low pass filter, and if we turn over to the left here, we can switch the subwoofer crossover off and have a straight pass through if we want, or we can do what we want to do, which is switch the subwoofer output on with a low pass filter. Low pass filter means all of the frequencies below this number are sent to the subwoofer for playback. We'll press enter, and we can set the subwoofer crossover frequency anywhere from 25 hertz. And we'll turn through these 40, 50, 63, 80, 100, 125, 160, 200, and 250 hertz. We can choose any one of those crossover points for our subwoofer. For right now, I'm going to choose 80 hertz. We'll press in on the volume control, and we have our choice of slope settings at any crossover frequency. Now, in this case, we've chosen 80 hertz, but we can have the slope be 6, 12, 18, 24, 30 or 36 decibels per octave. This is an amazingly steep slope. For right now, I'm going to choose 80 hertz at 12 decibels per octave as my slope for the subwoofer crossover. Once I've made my selections there, I'm going to hit the arrow back button. And one more. Let's roll over to the next setting, which is we can save our settings right here. If you want to save the settings you've been working on, press in on the volume control and confirm yes, and your settings will be saved, and you can recall those settings later using the load settings if you want to. Let's roll past that to the dynamic bass control. This can also be a very important part of your system. This big bass button over here is sort of an on-off switch for the dynamic bass control. Let's press enter to get into that. The dynamic bass control can be switched off, or you can have it on its low setting, or you can have it on the high setting. You know the dynamic bass control is on when you see the bass indicator pop up on the screen over here. Right now we have it set on high. So let's exit out of this menu. And we're back out to the radio here, and you can see I have the bass button over here and the bass indicator up on the screen. If I touch the bass button here, you can see that dynamic bass control is switched off. If I touch the bass control again here, dynamic bass control is switched on, and you see the indicator come up in the screen. But let's go back in there to make sure it's switched on high, because that's where we had set it. There's dynamic bass, and you can see it came back on high. All right, let's back up there and roll over to the next setting, which is our loudness control, and back around to our EQ settings. So that's all of the subwoofer settings. When you're done making your adjustments to your subwoofer, you can hit the go back button to escape.